When the Galactic Council stamped Hazard Class 1.2G, extreme caution across Earth's stellar coordinates, they thought they were protecting the universe from humanity's reckless nature. They never imagined humans would take it as a challenge. What started as cosmic segregation became the greatest act of defiance in galactic history. While alien civilizations cowered behind their safety protocols, humans did what they do best. They adapted, they built, and they soared above every limitation placed upon them. The floating cities weren't just humanity's answer to galactic prejudice. They were a declaration of war against the very concept of impossible. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning, transmitted through the same quantum channels that had once carried humanity's first tentative greetings to the stars. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the U.S. Xenological Affairs Building, watching the holographic display flicker to life, with official galactic seals and warning symbols that needed no translation. The Galactic Council's message was clear, clinical, and devastating. Earth had been officially classified as a Class 1.2G hazard world. The designation carried with it a comprehensive ban on galactic trade, tourism, and even diplomatic contact beyond emergency communications. Humanity was being quarantined not by disease or radiation, but by their own nature. Sarah read the document 3 times before the full weight settled in. The Council cited humanity's aggressive expansion tendencies, their reckless disregard for established safety protocols, and most damning of all, their dangerous innovation without proper oversight. The humans who had reached for the stars with jury-rigged rockets and dreams were now considered too dangerous for civilized space. The press conference that followed was chaos. Reporters from every major network crammed into the assembly hall, their voices rising in a cacophony of disbelief and anger. Sarah tried to maintain diplomatic composure as she explained the Council's decision, but inside, her own fury burned just as bright as the crowd's. "What exactly did we do wrong?" shouted Marcus Webb from the Global News Network. "We followed their first contact protocols. We submitted to their inspections. We've been model galactic citizens for 5 years." Sarah's jaw tightened. The truth was more complicated than that, and she knew it. Humanity had indeed followed the protocols, but they had also pushed boundaries. When the Zephyrian trade delegates had warned against establishing mining operations in asteroid belts without proper gravitational surveys, human engineers had developed new technologies to do it anyway. When the Crystalline Confederacy had insisted that certain deep space phenomena were too dangerous to study, human scientists had built probes that could survive what no other species dared approach. Each innovation had been a marvel of human ingenuity. Each breakthrough had also been a violation of established galactic safety standards that had kept peace in the galaxy for over 3,000 years. "The Council," Sarah said carefully, "has expressed concerns about our unorthodox methods." Behind her, the massive display screen showed footage from the past year. Human ships diving into solar coronas to harvest exotic matter. Mining stations constructed in gravity wells that made other species nauseous just to look at. Scientific expeditions to pulsars and black holes that other civilizations marked as absolute no-fly zones. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Pan-African Space Consortium stood up in the back of the room. "Our unorthodox methods have produced more scientific breakthroughs in 5 years than some council species achieve in centuries. Are we being punished for being good at what we do?" The truth was yes, they were being punished exactly for that. Humanity's rapid advancement had made the older galactic powers nervous. Species that had existed for millennia suddenly found themselves looking at relative newcomers who treated impossible challenges as weekend projects. The Vorthan hegemony had been particularly vocal in the council sessions. Their representative, a being called Zixthat, had presented detailed analyses of human behavior patterns. Human, Zixthat had argued, displayed a troubling tendency to attempt solutions that bypassed established safety margins. Where other species saw necessary caution, humans saw inefficient obstacles. The breaking point had come 6 months earlier when Captain Maria Santos had successfully navigated her exploration vessel through a Type 7 stellar storm. Such storms were considered absolutely lethal to all known forms of technology. The fact that Santos had not only survived but gathered unprecedented scientific data had terrified the council more than impressed them. If humans can survive what we consider impossible, the ethereal collective's ambassador had stated during the hearing, then they operate by different rules. This makes them unpredictable and therefore dangerous to galactic stability. Sarah had watched the vote through her diplomatic feeds. 47 species in favor of quarantine. 3 opposed, the rest abstaining, which in council politics meant tacit approval. Humanity was alone. Now, facing the assembled media, Sarah felt the weight of that isolation. "The council's decision is final," she said. "All galactic trade agreements are suspended. Our embassy staffs have 72 hours to return to Earth. No council species will be permitted to enter the Sol system without unanimous council approval." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Marcus Webb raised his hand again. "Ambassador, what's our response?" Sarah looked at him, then at the cameras broadcasting this moment to every corner of Earth and its colonies. The official diplomatic response would come from the Security Council and the various world leaders. But standing here representing her species at the moment they were cast out of galactic civilization, Sarah felt a different answer building in her chest. "We adapt," she said simply. "We always have." The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within days, human colonies found themselves completely cut off from galactic supply lines. The orbital stations around Jupiter and Saturn, which had relied heavily on exotic materials from the galactic markets, faced potential shutdowns within months. The research stations studying neutron stars and quasars lost their alien technical advisors overnight. President Martinez addressed the planet that evening from the emergency session of the United Nations. Her words were measured but carried an undercurrent of defiance that resonated across every human settlement from Luna to the Kuiper Belt. "We stand at a crossroads," she said. "We can accept this isolation as punishment and retreat into our own system, diminished and defeated. Or we can prove to the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength has never been our ability to follow rules. It's been our ability to write new ones." The plan that emerged from the emergency sessions was audacious even by human standards. If Earth was too dangerous for the galaxy, then humanity would remove Earth from the equation. Not the planet itself, but humanity's dependence on it. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the lead architect of the Luna Colony Project, presented the initial proposal to a joint session of every major space agency. The screens around her showed architectural diagrams that looked more like science fiction than serious engineering proposals. "Atmospheric processing ships," she explained, gesturing to the holographic displays, "not to terraform dead worlds, but to create completely artificial atmospheric envelopes in space. Self-contained cities that float free in the vacuum, powered by fusion cores and sustained by closed-loop life support systems." The room erupted in technical objections. The power requirements alone would demand fusion reactors beyond current human capabilities. The materials science challenges were staggering. The life support systems would need to be more reliable than anything humanity had ever built. "It's impossible," declared Dr. Robert Kim from the European Space Agency. "With trust, Teddy." Tanaka smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. "The Galactic Council agrees with you. They've documented extensively why such projects are considered beyond the capabilities of any species below Council oversight level. According to their own safety protocols, attempting to build truly independent space habitats without their technical assistance is classified as a classist 3 civilization suicide risk." The implication hung in the air. Humanity was being told they couldn't survive without galactic supervision. They were being treated as children too dangerous to be left alone, too incompetent to be trusted with advanced technology. "So we proved them wrong," President Martinez said from her seat at the table. "We build cities that don't need planets. We create a civilization that answers to no council, follows no external protocols, and owes nothing to anyone who thinks we're too dangerous to be free." The technical challenges were staggering, but so was human determination. Within weeks, every major space agency had contributed personnel to the project. Private corporations that had been experimenting with asteroid mining and orbital manufacturing suddenly found their research priorities shifted to atmospheric containment and gravity generation. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Okafor, a theoretical physicist who had been studying gravitational anomalies around black holes, realized that the same principles that allowed humans to operate in extreme gravitational fields could be reversed. Instead of building technology to survive impossible gravity, they could build technology to create selective gravity in weightless environments. "We don't need to generate gravity everywhere," he explained to the assembled engineers. "We just need to create stable gravity gradients within contained atmospheric volumes. The atmosphere itself becomes part of the structural integrity system." The concept was revolutionary. Instead of building massive rotating habitats like the space stations of previous decades, these new cities would use controlled gravitational fields to maintain both atmosphere and structural stability. The technology required fusion reactors operating at efficiency levels that pushed the boundaries of human engineering, but it was possible. Construction began simultaneously at 7 locations throughout the solar system. The first city, designated New Geneva, would be built in the asteroid belt where materials were abundant and galactic observation was limited. The second, New Singapore, would orbit Mars, serving as a testing ground for more advanced atmospheric processing systems. The work was dangerous beyond anything humanity had attempted. Teams of construction workers operated in hard vacuum, assembling components the size of city blocks with precision measured in millimeters. The margin for error was zero. A single failed weld or misaligned component could mean catastrophic decompression and the loss of thousands of lives. But humans had always excelled at impossible jobs. The construction crews developed new welding techniques that worked in cosmic radiation fields. Engineers designed modular components that could be assembled by workers in powered exoskeletons. Life support specialists created backup systems for the backup systems, ensuring that failure of any single component wouldn't doom an entire city. The work continued around the clock, driven by a mixture of necessity and spite. Every successful milestone was a direct contradiction of the Galactic Council's assessment of human capabilities. Every innovation proved that humanity could not only survive without supervision, but could thrive in conditions that other species considered uninhabitable. As the first atmospheric dome of New Geneva was completed and pressurized, teams of technicians worked frantically to balance the gravitational fields that would make the space livable. The moment when the first artificial rain fell inside the dome, condensing from carefully maintained humidity levels and gravitational fields that pulled water droplets in perfectly controlled arcs, marked more than a technical achievement. It marked the moment when humanity stopped being dependent on anyone else for survival. Standing in the observation deck of the construction station, watching the lights come on in humanity's first floating city, Sarah Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The diplomatic cables from the Galactic Council had been increasingly concerned as reports of human construction projects filtered through intelligence networks. Several species had requested clarification of humanity's activities. Others had submitted formal inquiries about whether the Sol system was violating quarantine protocols. All of them were asking the same underlying question: how were the humans doing this without help? The answer was simple. They were doing it because they had to, because being told something was impossible had never stopped humanity from attempting it, because the alternative to success was not just failure, but the confirmation that they were indeed too dangerous and too incompetent to be trusted with their own survival. As the first transport ships began carrying families to New Geneva, as children took their first steps in gravity fields that existed only because human engineers had refused to accept the word impossible, Sarah composed her response to the latest council inquiry. "The human species," she wrote, "is adapting to its new circumstances. We appreciate the Council's concern for our welfare, but we are managing quite well on our own." 6 months after the first families moved into New Geneva, the floating city had become something that defied every galactic assumption about what was possible. Dr. Maria Santos walked through the residential districts, marveling at how normal it all seemed. Children played in parks where the grass grew in carefully controlled gravity fields, their laughter echoing off dome walls that held back the infinite vacuum of space. Above them, the artificial sky displayed a perfect simulation of Earth's atmosphere, complete with clouds that formed and dissipated according to weather patterns programmed by atmospheric engineers. The city was home to nearly 50,000 people now, and it was growing every day. What had started as a desperate engineering project had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a completely independent human civilization that owed nothing to planetary resources or galactic oversight. The technical achievements were staggering. The fusion reactors that powered New Geneva operated at 97% efficiency, levels that the Galactic Council's own technical manuals claimed were theoretically impossible without exotic matter stabilizers that only 3 council species possessed. Human engineers had developed their own alternatives, using principles derived from black hole physics and quantum field manipulation that no other species had even attempted. But it was the social systems that truly impressed Maria. The Council had always assumed that species required extensive governmental oversight to maintain order in artificial environments. Their own space habitats were highly regulated, with strict protocols governing everything from resource allocation to reproduction rights. They had predicted that human floating cities would either collapse into chaos or evolve into authoritarian nightmares. Instead, New Geneva had developed what sociologists were calling adaptive democracy. Without the constraints of traditional planetary boundaries or resource limitations, human social organization had evolved in directions that surprised even humanity itself. Neighborhoods organized themselves around shared interests and expertise rather than geographic proximity. Governance was fluid, with leadership rotating based on expertise relevant to immediate challenges. The city's success had not gone unnoticed. Intelligence reports suggested that several council species were conducting covert observations of the Sol system, trying to understand how humanity was accomplishing what their own analyses said should be impossible. The Zephyrian hegemony had submitted 3 separate requests for humanitarian inspection of the floating cities, claiming concern for human welfare. Maria smiled as she read the latest diplomatic cables in her office aboard the administrative complex. The hegemony's concerns were transparently false. What they really wanted was access to human technical innovations that were rewriting the fundamental assumptions of space-based civilization. The breakthrough that had the Council truly worried wasn't just the cities themselves, but what humanity was doing with them. New Geneva had become a launching point for exploration projects that made the Council's safety-conscious species nervous. Human ships were pushing deeper into dangerous space than any Council expedition had ever attempted, using the floating cities as mobile supply bases that could be repositioned anywhere in the galaxy. Captain Lisa Park commanded the exploration vessel Defiant, one of the new ships designed specifically for extreme environment exploration. Unlike the careful, cautious approach favored by Council species, human exploration had become aggressively opportunistic. They studied phenomena that other species considered too dangerous to approach, gathered data from regions of space that galactic charts marked as absolute no-go zones. Lisa's current mission was typical of humanity's new approach. The Defiant was investigating a region of space where 2 neutron stars were in the process of merging, creating gravitational effects that Council physics said should tear apart any ship within 50 light-years. With trust, Teddy. Instead of maintaining safe distance like other species, Lisa had positioned her ship at the edge of the event horizon, using modified gravitational field generators to surf the space-time distortions while gathering unprecedented scientific data. We're recording gravitational waves with amplitude variations that don't match any Council theoretical models, reported Dr. Jennifer Kim from the ship's science station. The interaction patterns suggest that neutron star mergers create temporary stable micro-wormholes during the final collapse phase. Lisa nodded. watching the tactical display as her ship rode gravitational waves that would have destroyed any vessel built according to Council engineering standards. The Defiant was constructed using principles learned from building the floating cities. Instead of trying to resist extreme forces, they had learned to work with them, to find stable points within chaos itself. The data they were collecting would revolutionize understanding of gravitational physics, but that wasn't what excited Lisa most. The micro-wormholes Jennifer had detected offered possibilities that went far beyond scientific curiosity. If they could be stabilized and enlarged, they could provide instantaneous transportation across galactic distances without requiring the exotic matter that made Council faster-than-light travel so expensive and regulated. Back on New Geneva, Dr. Elena Vasquez reviewed the incoming data with growing excitement. The implications were staggering. Humanity had been cut off from galactic civilization partly because they couldn't afford the regulated FTL technologies that required Council oversight. But if they could develop their own alternative based on these gravitational phenomena, they could not only match Council transportation capabilities, but potentially exceed them. The work was dangerous beyond anything humanity had attempted before. Creating artificial wormholes required manipulating gravitational fields at energy levels that pushed their fusion technology to its absolute limits. The first experiments would be conducted in deep space far from any populated areas because the failure modes could potentially destroy entire star systems. But danger had never stopped humanity before. Within weeks, New Geneva had been reconfigured as a mobile research station, using its gravitational manipulation systems to position itself in an empty region of space where experimental failures wouldn't threaten anyone. Teams of physicists and engineers worked around the clock, designing containment systems for forces that the Galactic Council considered too dangerous for any species to attempt to harness. The breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration between human theoretical physicists and the city's atmospheric engineers. Dr. Okafor realized that the same principles used to maintain atmospheric integrity in the floating cities could be applied to wormhole stabilization. Instead of trying to contain the gravitational distortion, they could create a controlled environment around it, allowing stable passage while preventing the uncontrolled expansion that made natural wormholes so dangerous. "We're not building a wormhole," he explained to the assembled research team. "We're building a gravitational ecosystem that naturally generates stable wormhole events. The difference is like the difference between trying to capture lightning and learning to create controlled electrical fields." The first test was scheduled for a volume of space 2 light-years from the nearest star. The Defiant and 3 sister ships took position at safe distances. Their sensors focused on the experimental platform that would either revolutionize galactic transportation or create a gravitational anomaly visible from halfway across the galaxy. Dr. Tanaka supervised the final preparations from New Geneva's command center. The city itself had been positioned at the edge of the test zone, ready to provide emergency support or to evacuate immediately if the experiment showed signs of uncontrolled expansion. Every person aboard understood that they were either about to achieve something unprecedented or about to die trying. "All stations report ready," announced the test coordinator. "Beginning gravitational field generation in 10 seconds. The fusion reactors that powered New Geneva ramped up to maximum output, feeding power to the experimental apparatus through transmission systems that humanity had developed specifically for this project. The energy requirements were enormous, equivalent to the total power consumption of a Council homeworld, all focused on manipulating gravitational fields in ways that galactic science considered theoretically impossible. Space itself began to bend around the experimental platform. Sensors registered gravitational waves that propagated faster than light itself, creating ripples in space-time that could be detected from neighboring star systems. For a moment that lasted an eternity, human engineers held their breath as forces capable of destroying solar systems balanced on the edge between controlled manipulation and catastrophic runaway expansion. Then the wormhole opened. It was small, barely large enough for a single-person spacecraft, and it lasted only 17 seconds before the gravitational field generators reached their thermal limits and automatically shut down. But for those 17 seconds, The Defiant sensor probes detected the unmistakable signature of a stable passage through space-time that connected their location to a point over 300 light-years away. Humanity had just achieved faster-than-light travel without using a single component of Council technology. The implications rippled through human civilization like a shockwave. Within days, every floating city was being retrofitted with experimental wormhole generators. The designs were refined rapidly, with each test pushing the technology further. What had started as a 17-second microtunnel evolved into stable passages that could accommodate full-sized ships and remain open for hours at a time. More importantly, the technology was completely independent of galactic regulation. Council FTL travel required exotic matter produced only under strict oversight, with production quotas and usage licenses that kept non-Council species dependent on galactic civilization. Human wormhole technology required only the ability to manipulate gravitational fields, something that any civilization advanced enough to build fusion reactors could potentially achieve. The Council's response was swift and predictable. Emergency sessions were called to discuss the human situation. Intelligence reports confirmed that humanity had developed independent FTL capabilities without Council oversight or approval. Several species demanded immediate intervention to prevent humans from destabilizing galactic transportation infrastructure. But intervention proved more complicated than the Council had anticipated. The floating cities were mobile, capable of relocating anywhere in the galaxy with minimal preparation time. Human exploration ships were operating in regions of space that Council vessels couldn't safely approach. Most concerning of all, humans seemed to be deliberately seeking out the most dangerous and unstable regions of space, places where Council enforcement fleets couldn't follow even if they wanted to. Ambassador Sarah Chen received the Council's demands in her new office aboard New Geneva. The floating city had become humanity's mobile capital, representing their species in what was essentially a roving embassy that could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning or permission. The Council's message was direct: cease all unauthorized FTL development immediately. Submit to technical inspection and oversight. Accept Council regulation of human transportation technology in exchange for limited restoration of trade relationships. Sarah read the demands twice, then composed her response with the satisfaction of someone who held all the important cards. The human species appreciates the Council's ongoing concern for galactic stability, she wrote. We are pleased to inform you that our new transportation technologies have been thoroughly tested and pose no risk to galactic infrastructure. We will, of course, be happy to discuss technical cooperation with any Council species interested in learning more about our innovations. The subtle reversal was unmistakable. Instead of requesting permission or accepting oversight, humanity was offering to share their superior technology with species that had previously considered them too primitive to be trusted with galactic civilization. The offer was carefully calculated. Several younger Council species, particularly those who chafed under the technological dependency enforced by the older galactic powers, would be very interested in FTL technology that didn't require Council approval or exotic matter quotas. Humanity was positioning itself not as a supplicant seeking readmission to galactic civilization, but as an alternative technological power that could offer independence to species tired of Council oversight. The response from the Crystalline Confederacy arrived within hours. Their mathematical civilization had always prized innovation and technical excellence above political conformity. Their message was brief but significant. The Confederacy requests detailed technical specifications for human gravitational manipulation systems. We are prepared to offer full diplomatic recognition and mutual defense agreements in exchange for technology transfer. The Ethereal Collective, despite their vote for human quarantine, submitted a carefully worded inquiry about potential collaboration opportunities. The Zephyrian hegemony, humanity's strongest critics, suddenly began diplomatic approaches that emphasized mutual benefit and technological exchange. Within a week of demonstrating independent FTL capability, humanity had received more diplomatic overtures than they had in their entire previous history of galactic contact. The species that had quarantined them for being too dangerous suddenly found them very attractive as potential allies. Dr. Vasquez watched the political transformation from New Geneva's observation deck, The city now positioned in orbit around a rogue planet in neutral space where diplomatic meetings could be held without violating anyone's territorial claims. Below them, the planet's frozen surface reflected the light of nearby stars, a reminder of how hostile the universe could be to life that couldn't adapt and overcome impossible challenges. "We've gone from pariahs to kingmakers in 6 months," she observed to Dr. Tanaka, who had joined her to watch the latest diplomatic shuttle arrive from the Ethereal Collective. Tanaka nodded, but her expression was thoughtful rather than triumphant. "The question is what we do with that position. We could restore our galactic status, maybe even join the Council eventually. Or we could keep pushing boundaries until we're so far ahead that the whole galactic power structure becomes irrelevant." It was a choice that would define humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. Accept integration back into galactic civilization as equals, or continue the path of aggressive independence that had brought them this far. As the ethereal shuttle docked with New Geneva's diplomatic facilities, Elena realized that the choice had probably already been made. Humanity had never been good at accepting limitations, even beneficial ones. Given the option between comfortable membership in someone else's civilization or the dangerous freedom to write their own rules, there was really no question which path they would choose. The floating cities were just the beginning. 3 years after the first diplomatic overtures, humanity had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. What had started as a quarantine had evolved into an alternative power structure that threatened the very foundations of council authority. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the central hub of New Geneva, now expanded into a massive complex that served as the capital of what galactic media had begun calling the Human Autonomy Zone. New Geneva had grown from a single floating city into a vast network of interconnected habitats, each specialized for different functions. The original residential areas had been joined by massive industrial complexes where humans manufactured technologies that the Council had previously controlled exclusively. Research stations floated nearby, their exotic profiles housing experiments that pushed the boundaries of physics in directions that made Council scientists nervous. But the most significant change was political. 7 Council species had formally withdrawn from galactic oversight agreements, choosing instead to align themselves with humanity's technology-sharing collective. The Crystalline Confederacy had been first, drawn by mathematical innovations that emerged from human chaos theory approaches to engineering. The Aurelius Republic followed, their warrior culture attracted to human military technologies that prioritized effectiveness over safety protocols. Each defection had weakened the Council's ability to maintain galactic order through technological dependency. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had been stable because only Council-approved technologies were widely available. Species that wanted faster-than-light travel, advanced manufacturing, or planetary-scale life support had to accept Council oversight and regulation. Humanity had shattered that system by developing alternatives that were not only independent of Council control, but often superior to Council technologies. Human wormhole generators required no exotic matter. Human fusion reactors operated at efficiency levels that Council physics claimed were impossible. Human floating cities could survive in environments that would destroy traditional space habitats. Dr. Marcus Webb, former news reporter turned director of interspecies relations, reviewed the latest intelligence reports from his office in the diplomatic sector. The reports painted a picture of a galaxy in transition, with the old order struggling to maintain control as more species questioned the necessity of Council oversight. The Zephyrian hegemony has submitted formal proposals for technological standardization agreements, he told Sarah during their weekly briefing. They want us to voluntarily limit our capabilities to levels that don't threaten galactic stability. They want us to handicap ourselves so they can feel safe. What's our response? We politely declined, Marcus replied, but the situation is more complex than that. Intelligence suggests that several hardline Council species are considering military intervention to restore galactic order. The Vorthan hegemony has been conducting fleet exercises near neutral space, and their ship configuration suggests they're practicing attacks on mobile targets. The threat of military action had been growing for months. The Council's older member species, particularly those who had built their power on technological gatekeeping, viewed humanity's independence as an existential threat. If humans could develop superior technologies without oversight, what was to stop other species from following their example? The entire galactic hierarchy could collapse if enough species decided they didn't need Council protection and regulation. Sarah studied the tactical displays showing Vorthan fleet movements. The hegemony commanded some of the most powerful warships in the galaxy, vessels designed during the last great galactic conflict over 2 millennia ago. Their ships were massive, heavily armored, and equipped with weapons that could devastate planetary surfaces. But they were also built according to Council specifications, optimized for the kind of careful, methodical warfare that the galaxy had practiced for thousands of years. They were designed to engage other Council standard fleets in predictable battle scenarios where both sides followed established tactical doctrines and safety protocols. "What's the status of our defensive preparations?" Sarah asked. Marcus pulled up another set of displays showing the disposition of human forces throughout the galaxy. What he showed her would have seemed impossible just 5 years earlier. Humanity had gone from having no military presence beyond their home system to maintaining the most mobile and technologically advanced fleet in galactic history. The human approach to military technology had been as revolutionary as everything else they touched. Instead of building massive, heavily armored battleships like the Council species, humans had developed small, fast vessels that could appear anywhere in the galaxy through wormhole networks and disappear just as quickly. Their weapons were based on gravitational manipulation technology that could tear apart enemy ships by creating localized space-time distortions. More importantly, human military doctrine was built around concepts that the galaxy had never seen before. Council warfare was formal, controlled, with clearly defined rules of engagement and elaborate protocols for surrender and negotiation. Human warfare was chaotic, opportunistic, and utterly unpredictable. "We have 67 attack squadrons positioned throughout the galaxy," Marcus reported. Each squadron includes 12 fast attack vessels with full wormhole capability. Additionally, we have 15 mobile command stations disguised as civilian research platforms and 43 automated defense networks positioned in systems that the Council considers uninhabitable. Humanity's real military advantage wasn't in ships or weapons, but in their approach to warfare itself. While Council species planned carefully and moved methodically, humans had embraced what their military theorists called. Her ship, the Defiant, had been upgraded with the latest human military technologies and was currently operating deep in Vorthan space, conducting what the official reports called scientific surveys, but which everyone understood were reconnaissance missions. Lisa's current assignment took her to the edge of a stellar nursery where young stars were forming in gravitational conditions that the Vorthan considered impassable. While Vorthan ships stayed safely outside the stellar formation, the Defiant moved freely through gravity wells and radiation fields that should have destroyed any vessel smaller than a dreadnought. "We're getting detailed scans of their border defense platforms," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez. "Their design philosophy is interesting. Massive fixed installations with overlapping fields of fire designed to create impenetrable defensive barriers." Lisa studied the sensor readings with professional interest. The Vorthan approach was classically Council: build defenses so strong that no rational enemy would attempt to breach them, then rely on the implicit threat to maintain order. It was the same philosophy that had kept galactic peace for millennia. The assumption that superior firepower would deter conflict, but it assumed that enemies would behave rationally according to Council standards of what was possible. Humans had never been particularly concerned with either rationality or Council standards. "Plot a course through the stellar nursery," Lisa ordered. "I want to see what their defenses look like from the other side." The maneuver was typical human military thinking. Instead of confronting the enemy's strength directly, find an approach that rendered their advantages irrelevant. The Vorthan had positioned their defenses to control all conventional approach routes. But they hadn't considered the possibility that an enemy might fly directly through a region of space where young stars were actively forming. The Defiant used its gravitational manipulation systems to surf the stellar formation's own gravitational fields, riding waves of space-time distortion that masked its presence from conventional sensors. When it emerged on the far side of the Vorthan defense line, it was positioned to observe their installations from directions that the designers had never considered possible. What the ship's sensors revealed was both encouraging and concerning. The Vorthan defenses were formidable when attacked from expected directions, but they had significant blind spots created by their own assumptions about what was tactically feasible. A coordinated human attack using unconventional approach routes could potentially neutralize the entire defensive network before the defenders could respond effectively. But the installations themselves were massive, housing enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. If the Vorthan decided to launch a preemptive attack on human positions, the damage could be catastrophic even if the humans ultimately won. Lisa transmitted her findings back to New Geneva through encrypted wormhole communications, then began the delicate process of withdrawing from Vorthan space without triggering any automatic defense responses. The intelligence she had gathered would help human strategists prepare for potential conflict, but she hoped it would never be needed. Back at New Geneva, Sarah reviewed the reconnaissance reports with growing concern. The Vorthan military preparations were more extensive than anyone had realized. They weren't just planning defensive actions, they were preparing for a full-scale invasion of human space designed to eliminate humanity's technological independence permanently. "They're scared," observed Dr. Elena Vasquez during the emergency strategy session. 3,000 years of galactic stability, and suddenly there's a species that doesn't need their permission to innovate. They're facing the collapse of everything their civilization is built on. Sarah nodded, but her expression remained grim. Understanding the Vorthan motivation didn't make their threat less dangerous. The reports suggested they were planning to launch simultaneous attacks on all major human installations, using overwhelming firepower to destroy humanity's technological infrastructure before the humans could mount an effective resistance.
"What they don't understand," said Dr.
Tanaka, is that our infrastructure isn't vulnerable to that kind of attack? The floating cities are mobile. Our manufacturing facilities can be relocated through wormhole networks faster than their fleets can move. Even if they destroy everything we've built, we can rebuild it in locations they've never seen. It was true, but Sarah knew it wasn't the complete picture. Humanity's strength lay in their adaptability and technological innovation, but those advantages depended on having time and resources to implement solutions. A massive, coordinated attack could disrupt human operations enough to prevent effective response, even if it couldn't eliminate humanity's capabilities entirely. The solution, when it came, was characteristically human in its audacity. Instead of preparing for defensive warfare or launching preemptive attacks, humanity chose a third option that no council species would have considered. They decided to change the rules of engagement entirely. Dr. Okafor had been working on modifications to the wormhole technology that pushed the physics even further into uncharted territory. Instead of creating point-to-point connections between specific locations, his new approach could establish what he called dimensional phasing, temporarily shifting objects partially out of normal space-time to make them immune to conventional attacks. "It's not true invisibility," he explained to the assembled military commanders. "The ships still exist, but they're phase-shifted just enough to be unaffected by normal matter interactions. They can observe and move through normal space, but conventional weapons pass right through them. The technology was experimental and dangerous." Ships using dimensional phasing existed in a state of quantum uncertainty that put enormous stress on both equipment and crew. The power requirements were staggering, and the long-term effects of extended phasing were unknown, but it offered possibilities that rendered traditional military doctrine obsolete. Phased ships could pass through enemy defenses without triggering sensors, position themselves inside enemy formations, and return to normal space to launch attacks from positions that should be impossible to reach. The first operational test was conducted by Captain Santos aboard the Determination. one of the new ships designed specifically for phase warfare applications. The target was a Vorthan listening post positioned in neutral space to monitor human ship movements. Santos engaged the phase generators while approaching the listening post through what appeared to be completely empty space. The determination flickered in and out of visible spectrum as its quantum state fluctuated between normal space and the parallel dimension where phased objects existed. From the Vorthan perspective, the listening post was attacked by an enemy that materialized from nothing, delivered precise strikes that disabled their sensors and communications without harming the crew, then vanished again without trace. The attack violated every assumption about what was tactically possible in space combat. The demonstration had its intended effect. Within hours, emergency communications were flying between Vorthan command centers and Council headquarters. Intelligence reports described weapons and tactics that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. Military analysts struggled to develop countermeasures for enemies that could appear and disappear at will. More importantly, the attack forced the galaxy to confront an uncomfortable truth. Humanity had moved beyond simply developing alternatives to Council technology. They were creating capabilities that transcended the fundamental assumptions upon which galactic civilization was built. The Vorthan military preparations slowed as commanders struggled to adapt their strategies to an enemy that didn't follow any recognizable tactical doctrine. How do you defend against an attacker who can materialize inside your defenses? How do you plan military operations when your enemy's capabilities seem to violate the basic laws of physics? Sarah watched the intelligence reports with satisfaction. The goal hadn't been to provoke a war, but to demonstrate that war itself had become an obsolete concept when dealing with humanity. The galaxy could choose to accept human independence and work toward mutually beneficial cooperation, or it could continue escalating toward a conflict that it couldn't win using conventional methods. The choice, as always, belonged to the galaxy. Humanity would adapt to whatever decision was made, because adaptation was what they did best. But for the first time since the quarantine began, Sarah was confident that the choice would favor cooperation over conflict. The floating cities continued their dance through space, humanity's mobile civilization growing stronger and more capable with each passing day. They had proven that independence was possible, that innovation couldn't be controlled, and that the word impossible was just another challenge to be overcome. The galaxy was beginning to understand what that meant for everyone. The discovery came from an unexpected source. A routine deep space survey mission that had been investigating gravitational anomalies in the galactic outer rim. Dr. Jennifer Kim aboard the research vessel Pioneer had been tracking unusual space-time distortions when her sensors detected something that changed everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. "We're reading artificial structures," she reported to New Geneva's command center, her voice tight with disbelief. Massive artificial structures in regions that galactic charts mark as completely empty space. The gravitational signatures suggest engineering on a scale that dwarfs anything the Council has ever built. Sarah Chen studied the incoming data from her command station, watching as the Pioneer's sensors painted a picture that shouldn't exist. The structures were enormous, larger than most space stations, but built using materials and techniques that didn't match any known galactic technology. More disturbing, they were old. Carbon dating suggested they had been abandoned for over 5,000 years. "How many structures are we talking about?" Sarah asked. "Preliminary surveys suggest hundreds, possibly thousands, scattered throughout the outer rim." Jennifer replied, "They're positioned in what appears to be a defensive network. But defending against what? There's nothing out there but empty space and dead stars." The implications were staggering. If the structures were 5,000 years old, they predated the Galactic Council by 2 millennia. They represented evidence of a civilization that had existed before the current galactic order, a civilization that had apparently built defensive installations on a scale that made Council military preparations look like children's toys. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined Sarah in the command center as more data streamed in from the Pioneer. The readings were unlike anything in galactic databases. The structures used materials that seemed to manipulate space-time directly, creating localized effects that bent light and gravity in ways that human physics was only beginning to understand. "This changes everything," Elena said quietly. "If there was a civilization capable of building this before the Council existed, what happened to them? And why didn't the Council ever mention finding these installations?" The answer to that question became clear when Sarah reviewed historical galactic records more carefully. The Outer Rim territories where the structures had been found were designated as quarantine zones. In Council databases, regions considered too dangerous for exploration or settlement. The official explanations cited various hazards: gravitational instabilities, radiation fields, spatial anomalies that made navigation impossible. But the real reason was beginning to emerge from the data. The Council knew about the structures. They had always known. The quarantine zones weren't protecting Galaxy from natural hazards. They were hiding evidence of a predecessor civilization that the Council didn't want other species to discover. "Send additional survey teams," Sarah ordered. "I want detailed scans of every structure in that region, and I want to know why the Council has been lying about what's out there." Over the following weeks, human exploration teams spread throughout the Outer Rim regions, using their superior mobility and unconventional approach to investigation to explore areas that Council fleets had avoided for millennia. What they found painted a picture of galactic history that contradicted every official Council account. The predecessor civilization had been vast, technologically advanced beyond anything the galaxy had seen since. Their installations suggested a species that had mastered technologies that made current galactic capabilities look primitive. Gravitational manipulation systems that dwarfed human achievements, manufacturing facilities that could apparently create matter from pure energy, defensive installations that could generate force fields capable of withstanding direct stellar bombardment. But most importantly, the installations contained data archives, ancient computer systems that had remained operational for 5 millennia, protected by self-repair mechanisms that operated on principles human engineers were struggling to understand. Marcus Webb supervised the first successful interface with one of the ancient data systems from his temporary research station in the Outer Rim. The process was delicate, requiring careful translation between utterly alien computer architectures and human technological approaches. But when the connection was finally established, the information that emerged was revolutionary. They called themselves the Architects, Marcus reported to New Geneva via encrypted wormhole communication. They were the galaxy's first technological civilization, achieving faster-than-light travel and galactic colonization over 7,000 years ago. According to their records, they established the infrastructure that the current galactic civilization is built on. The historical implications were staggering. The Galactic Council hadn't created galactic civilization. They had inherited it. The hyperspace beacons that enabled galactic navigation, the stable wormhole networks that connected major systems, even the basic principles of space-time manipulation that made galactic civilization possible, all of it had been originally developed by the Architects. But the really shocking revelation was what had happened to them. They didn't disappear gradually, Marcus continued, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. According to their final records, they were systematically eliminated by an alliance of younger species who feared their technological superiority, the species that would eventually form the Galactic Council. The records painted a picture of coordinated genocide on a galactic scale. The Architects had been too advanced, too independent, too unwilling to submit to the collective oversight that the younger species demanded. So the alliance had made a collective decision: eliminate the Architects entirely, and claim their technology as their own inheritance. The parallels to humanity's current situation were impossible to ignore. An advanced species that developed technologies beyond galactic norms, quarantined by species that feared their independence, facing potential military action from an alliance concerned about galactic stability. Sarah Chen read the translated records with growing anger and determination. The Council hadn't just quarantined humanity out of safety concerns. They were following a precedent established millennia ago when they had solved the problem of technological independence by committing genocide against the galaxy's most advanced civilization. "How complete are the architect records?" she asked Marcus. "Extensive. They kept detailed documentation of their technologies, their social structures, and their final war against the Council's predecessor alliance. More importantly, they left behind what appears to be a complete technological database. Everything they knew about advanced physics, engineering, manufacturing processes, even theoretical work on technologies they hadn't finished developing. Humanity had discovered not just evidence of a lost civilization, but a complete archive of technologies that were millennia ahead of anything the galaxy had seen since. Technologies that could transform human capabilities from merely superior to utterly dominant. But accessing the technology came with risks that went beyond technical challenges. If the Council learned that humanity had discovered the architect installations and their technological archives, the response would be swift and decisive. The Council couldn't allow another species to access technologies that would make them as advanced as the architects had been. The decision to proceed was unanimous among human leadership. The risks of discovery were enormous, but the potential benefits were even greater. Humanity could advance their technological capabilities by millennia, gaining access to innovations that would make their current achievements look primitive. Dr. Okafor led the technical analysis teams that began reverse engineering architect technologies. The work was incredibly complex, requiring new approaches to physics and engineering that pushed human understanding to its limits. But the results were extraordinary. The first breakthrough was in energy generation. Architect power systems operated on principles that converted matter directly to energy, with 100% efficiency, producing power output levels that made human fusion reactors look like primitive batteries. More importantly, the systems were stable, safe, and could be scaled up or down to meet any conceivable energy requirement. The second breakthrough was in manufacturing. Architect fabrication systems could apparently create any desired object from raw atomic components, assembling matter at the quantum level with precision that eliminated all waste and inefficiency. The implications for human industrial capacity were staggering, but the most significant discovery was in the field of space-time manipulation. The architects had developed technologies that could create stable pocket dimensions, allowing for storage and transportation capabilities that transcended the normal limitations of three-dimensional space. Their most advanced installations existed partially outside normal space-time, making them effectively immune to conventional attack. Captain Lisa Parks supervised the first field tests of architect-derived technologies aboard a specially modified version of the Defiant. The ship had been equipped with prototype systems reverse-engineered from architect installations, turning it into the most advanced vessel in galactic history. The capabilities were extraordinary. The ship could phase completely out of normal space-time, becoming effectively invisible and intangible while retaining the ability to observe and interact with the normal universe. Its weapons systems could manipulate space-time directly, creating gravitational anomalies that could tear apart entire fleets. Most importantly, its new power systems provided virtually unlimited energy for all operations. "We're not just ahead of galactic technology anymore," Lisa reported during her first test flight. "We're operating on a completely different level. The ship feels like it's barely constrained by normal physics." The test results confirmed what the theoretical analysis had suggested. Humanity had gained access to technologies that placed them millennia ahead of any other galactic civilization. They were no longer just independent of Council oversight. They were approaching the level of technological dominance that had made the architects so threatening to the galaxy's power structure. The Council's response to intelligence reports about human activities in the Outer Rim was predictably dramatic. Emergency sessions were convened, military preparations accelerated, and diplomatic protests became increasingly urgent. Several Council species began openly discussing the need for decisive action to prevent humans from becoming an existential threat to galactic civilization. But the Council faced a fundamental problem. Their predecessor alliance had been able to eliminate the architects because they had achieved surprise and overwhelming numerical superiority. humanity couldn't be eliminated the same way because they had learned from architect history and prepared accordingly. Human floating cities had been redesigned using architect principles, making them capable of existing partially outside normal space-time. Human military fleets were now equipped with technologies that made them effectively immune to conventional attack. Most importantly, humanity had established hidden bases throughout the galaxy, using pocket dimension technology to create installations that couldn't be detected or attacked by any known methods. The galaxy was facing a species that had become as technologically advanced as the architects had been. But without the architects' vulnerability to coordinated attack, humanity was distributed, mobile, and now possessed capabilities that made them effectively unconquerable. Ambassador Sarah Chen prepared her response to the Council's latest demands from New Geneva's command center, now expanded with architect-derived technologies that made the floating city larger on the inside than its external dimensions suggested. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity was preparing to confront the galaxy from a city that existed partially outside normal spacetime, protected by technologies developed by the galaxy's last independent civilization. Her message to the Council was brief but comprehensive. Humanity acknowledges the galaxy's concerns about technological disruption. We are prepared to discuss frameworks for peaceful coexistence that respect both galactic stability and species autonomy. However, we will not accept oversight, regulation, or limitation of our technological development. We have learned from history what happens to species who surrender their independence to collective oversight. The implications were clear. Humanity knew about the architects. They knew about the genocide that had established the current galactic order, and they had made certain that history would not repeat itself. The galaxy would have to find a new way forward, because the old solutions were no longer possible. Human civilization continued to grow and evolve, now accelerated by technologies that allowed them to expand beyond the normal constraints of space and time. The floating cities multiplied, existing in pocket dimensions that could house billions of humans while occupying virtually no space in the normal universe. Human exploration fleets pushed into regions of space that no other species could reach, guided by architect navigation systems that revealed layers of reality that conventional physics couldn't detect. The quarantine was effectively meaningless now. Humanity operated on a level that transcended normal galactic limitations. They could be anywhere, do anything, and create whatever they needed without depending on galactic infrastructure or approval. The Galactic Council faced a choice that their predecessors had never had to consider: how to coexist with a species that was too advanced to control and too well prepared to eliminate. For the first time in galactic history, technological independence had become permanent. 5 years after discovering the Architect archives, humanity had fundamentally transformed not just their own civilization, but the entire structure of galactic society. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the central plaza of New Geneva, now a city that existed simultaneously in 17 different dimensional phases, watching representatives from 43 species arrive for the Galaxy Reformation Summit. The transformation had been inevitable once humanity began sharing architect technologies with other species. The Crystalline Confederacy had been first to accept human offers of technological partnership, followed rapidly by dozens of younger civilizations that had chafed under Council oversight for millennia. Within 3 years, a new galactic alliance had emerged that rendered the old Council structure effectively obsolete. But the real revolution wasn't technological, it was philosophical. Humanity had proven that the galaxy's foundational assumption was wrong. Species didn't need oversight and regulation to develop advanced technologies safely. They needed freedom to innovate and the wisdom to learn from their mistakes. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked through the city's newest district, the Cultural Exchange Center, where beings from across the galaxy worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Zephyrian mathematicians collaborated with human chaos theorists to develop new approaches to navigational mathematics. Ethereal collective artists worked with crystalline engineers to create aesthetic technologies that merged beauty with function. Aurelius warriors trained alongside human military specialists, sharing tactical innovations that pushed both cultures toward new forms of strategic thinking. "It's what the galaxy should have been from the beginning," Elena observed to Dr. Cast. Tanaka, as they watched a mixed-species research team successfully test a new form of matter transmission that combined human gravitational manipulation with architect quantum principles and crystalline mathematical optimization. The success was typical of what happened when species were allowed to collaborate without council oversight. Instead of being limited to predetermined technological pathways, mixed-species teams could combine approaches in ways that created exponential advancement. Human innovation, when combined with alien mathematical precision or aesthetic sensibility or warrior pragmatism, produced results that exceeded what any single species could achieve alone. But the transformation hadn't been without conflict. The older council species, particularly the Vorthan hegemony and the Zephyrian Central Authority, had initially resisted the new galactic order with increasing desperation. Military confrontations had been brief but decisive. Human fleets equipped with architect-derived technologies and supported by allied species, using human-developed innovations, had proven utterly superior to traditional Council forces. The decisive moment had come during the Battle of Nexus Prime, when a combined Vorthan-Zephyrian fleet had attempted to destroy New Geneva and eliminate human leadership. Captain Lisa Park, commanding a squadron of ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime, had demonstrated the futility of conventional warfare against advanced human technology. The battle hadn't lasted long enough to be called a proper engagement. Human ships had phased through Vorthan defenses like they didn't exist, disabled enemy vessels with gravitational weapons that left crews unharmed but ships completely inoperable, then vanished back into dimensional phase. More importantly, humanity had used the encounter to demonstrate technologies that transcended normal concepts of military force. Instead of destroying the Vorthan fleet, human engineers had simply relocated it, all 47 ships and their crews, to a safe system 3,000 light-years away, using mass displacement techniques that the architects had developed for moving entire planets. The message had been unmistakable. Humanity wasn't trying to conquer or destroy the old galactic order. They were simply making it irrelevant. Species that chose cooperation would benefit from unprecedented technological advancement. Species that chose conflict would find their ability to wage war removed entirely, but their people and civilizations left unharmed. The psychological impact had been more effective than any military victory. Within months, Council resistance had collapsed as species realized that opposition was not just futile but completely pointless. Humanity could neutralize any threat without causing harm, relocate any problem without violence, and solve any crisis through applications of technology that made conventional solutions obsolete. Ambassador Chen reviewed the final preparations for the summit from her office in the governmental district, a space that existed in 11 dimensions and could accommodate representatives from species with radically different environmental requirements simultaneously. The agenda was ambitious, establishing new frameworks for galactic governance based on cooperative development rather than regulatory oversight. The old council system had been built on the assumption that technological advancement needed to be carefully controlled to prevent chaos and conflict. The new system proposed by humanity and their allies was built on the opposite assumption, that technological advancement should be accelerated through cooperation and that apparent chaos often led to breakthrough innovations. "We're not just changing how the galaxy governs itself," observed Dr. Marcus Webb, now serving as Director of Galactic Reformation. "We're changing the fundamental assumptions about what civilization means. Instead of stability through control, we're creating stability through adaptability." The transformation was visible throughout the galaxy. Human-designed floating cities had inspired similar projects by dozens of species, leading to the development of mobile civilizations that could relocate anywhere in the galaxy as needed. Architect-derived technologies had revolutionized manufacturing, transportation, and energy production for every species that chose to participate in the new cooperative framework. Most significantly, the discovery and exploration of previously unknown regions of space had accelerated dramatically. Human dimensional phase technology allowed exploration of regions that existed between normal space and hyperspace, revealing entire layers of reality that had been invisible to conventional sensors. Joint human-alien expedition teams were mapping cosmic phenomena that redefined understanding of universal structure. Dr. Celebrating Jennifer Kim commanded the exploration vessel Transcendence, equipped with the most advanced survey technologies that human-alien cooperation had produced. Her current mission exemplified the new approach to galactic exploration, investigating dimensional anomalies in regions that the old council had declared permanently off-limits. We're reading structures that exist in at least 12 different dimensional phases simultaneously, she reported to New Geneva during her survey of the Nexus Void, a region of space that old galactic charts marked as a navigation hazard. We're looking at evidence of a civilization that transcended normal space-time entirely. The discovery of the Transcendents, as they came to be known, provided yet another revelation about galactic history. The architects hadn't been the first advanced civilization to disappear from the galaxy. They had been part of a cycle that repeated every few thousand years. Innovative species would advance beyond the tolerance of established galactic powers, leading to conflict that usually ended in the destruction of the advanced species. But the Transcendents had found a different solution. Instead of fighting or accepting destruction, they had evolved beyond the need for normal space-time entirely, establishing their civilization in dimensional regions that couldn't be reached or threatened by species limited to conventional physics. The implications were profound. The galaxy contained multiple layers of civilization, each more advanced than the previous, but separated by dimensional barriers that prevented contact or conflict. Humanity had reached the threshold where they could choose to follow the same path, transcending normal space-time to join the Transcendents in dimensions beyond conventional reach. But humanity chose differently. Instead of ascending to transcendent isolation, they remained engaged with normal space-time while expanding their influence across multiple dimensional phases. They chose to help other species advance rather than leaving them behind. We're not trying to escape the galaxy, Sarah explained to the assembled delegates at the summit's opening session. We're trying to transform it. Every species should have the opportunity to reach their full potential without being limited by the fears or prejudices of others. The new galactic charter that emerged from the summit reflected this philosophy. Instead of regulatory oversight, the new system provided technological and educational support to help species develop their capabilities safely and effectively. Instead of restricting innovation, it encouraged experimentation and rewarded breakthrough achievements. Instead of maintaining stability through control, it created resilience through diversity and adaptability. The Galactic Development Collective, as the new organization was named, was structured around principles that would have been impossible under the old council system. Membership was voluntary and could be revoked at any time. Technological development was encouraged and supported rather than regulated. Species were free to pursue their own paths without oversight, while having access to cooperative resources when they chose to participate in joint projects. Most importantly, the new system was designed to prevent the cycle of conflict that had destroyed previous advanced civilizations. Instead of allowing fear to drive the suppression of innovation, the collective actively worked to help all species advance together, reducing the technological disparities that had historically led to conflict. The transformation succeeded beyond humanity's most optimistic projections. Within 2 years of the summit, galactic technological development had accelerated exponentially. Species that had been stagnant for millennia under council oversight began producing innovations that revolutionized their capabilities. Joint projects between species with complementary approaches created solutions to problems that had seemed insurmountable. The floating cities multiplied throughout the galaxy as other species adopted and adapted human designs for their own needs. Wormhole networks expanded to connect previously isolated regions of space. Dimensional phase technology made exploration and colonization possible in regions that had been completely inaccessible to conventional methods. But the most significant change was cultural. The galaxy had moved from a civilization based on fear and control to one based on curiosity and cooperation. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together on projects that benefited everyone. Conflicts that had seemed intractable were resolved through technological solutions that created new possibilities rather than forcing zero-sum choices. Standing in the observation deck of New Geneva as it orbited the galactic core, Sarah watched the lights of thousands of human and alien installations spread throughout space. The floating cities had evolved into vast networks that spanned star systems, connected by transportation technologies that made distance essentially meaningless. But the real achievement wasn't visible in the physical structures. It was the transformation of galactic civilization itself from a system that feared change to one that embraced it, from a structure that suppressed innovation to one that celebrated it, from a galaxy that punished independence. Humanity had been marked as too dangerous for galactic civilization. Instead of accepting that judgment, they had made galactic civilization worthy of their participation. They had transformed not just their own capabilities, but the entire framework of what was possible when intelligent species chose cooperation over control. The floating cities continued their eternal dance through space, no longer symbols of humanity's isolation, but beacons of a new form of galactic civilization. One that proved that the word impossible was just another problem to be solved, another limitation to be transcended, another opportunity to demonstrate that the universe belonged to any species brave enough to reach for the stars. The galaxy had tried to limit humanity's potential. Instead, humanity had expanded the galaxy's definition of what potential meant, and they were just getting started. Earth was marked a 1.2G hazard world by the Galactic Council. So we constructed floating cities. Part 2, HFY.